Hello, my dear friend, Dr. Crystal Lawson. Welcome to the Nurse Leader Debrief.
I have been looking forward
I
to
know
this
me
for far
too. It
too
took
long.
us way too long to get this scheduled, but my gosh, I just laugh sometimes when I think about how we met and just how our friendship has grown over the years and how we've grown and personally and professionally. And I'm just so proud of you and so glad to have you on to share some of your wisdom with our listeners.
Oh, back at you. What a fun journey.
Speaking of, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? Our audience is primarily emerging leaders, supervisors, managers, and directors. And so I know you have just a heart and a passion for that group of individuals. So, how did you come to that?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to try to keep it concise because this is why I get out of bed every single day. So I am a nurse by background and found my way into leadership when we started our magnet journey, being the first unit council chair, having no idea what I'm doing. And I thought this is where I belong. I thought I wanted to be a CNO, and I'm so thankful I've landed where I am. But, I became the charge nurse with no training. You just show up that day and good luck. Same thing happens when you move into the manager role. Here are the keys, here's a budget. I have no idea what to do. And as I'm along my journey, I get accepted into the A1L fellowship, which is where we have a bond from. My eyes were open to this whole world that I'm not alone. There are so many brilliant, bright people out there changing the world. So I'm moving forward, thinking I'm going to be a CNO, and I start a nurse residency program. And the entire time, all I can think is, I love this work, but we really need this for leaders. Who's taking care of the leaders? And so, somewhere along the way, as I'm working on my doctorate, I get to go to AONL and bring to life this transition to practice program, working with all of these brilliant people from across the country, teaching the aspiring leadership courses, all the way having an impact on the executives. And that's where I ran into you my very first day at AONL. I went to orientation and flew to St. Louis, and there I met Amy. She was exposed to my nonsense.
And loved every minute of it. So we were a great pair, I thought, teaching if humbly.
Oh my gosh, I really miss those days of just teaching with you on the fly the class shows up and they're like, "I don't understand what you're talking about." So we're in the back of the room just recreating and oh,
Mhm.
the journey's been fun. But so my heart lies in I really believe that those supervisors, the charge nurses, the nurse managers, whatever their job titles are, those ones on the front line really hold it all together. And we really have to do a good job equipping them, inspiring them, empowering them to be the leaders that can change the game for the patients and the communities we serve. So I get to live my dream, just traveling around, meeting the most brilliant, brightest people that are making a significant impact on lives. Again, I could go on, but this is my
Yeah,
heart and
absolutely. I know it was one reason that we bonded together early on is just this passion for we've known it for a long time since we held those roles or since we began to really develop and teach when you had that brilliant insight to know that we need a transition to practice. I've had guests on. We were just talking about one when Dr. Brooks was on. She was talking about starting as a manager in the 80s and, there was no training or development, and I'm like, "How sad that here we are in 2024," and there is some people have tried really hard to put some things together, but the program that you developed is, really comprehensive, really up to date, and includes just all aspects of what a leader might need to know, and I genuinely believe that we have the outline there, we have a great program, and it's something that really leaders across the country, across the world could benefit from. We run into people talking about this very same issue in countries around the globe.
we are not alone. And I'm so thankful that I got to play a part in creating that. And just what A1L has done for all of the membership, what it's done for us as individuals. I mean, thank God for them. That's how I met you and so many other really incredible
Yeah, it
people in my
really
life.
is a
So I
tremendous place to connect and with, and really challenge things and move forward into contemporary what is really needed from our leaders, and I think one thing that is just fun on the podcast that we can talk about. You and I have talked about quite a lot. We have competencies that we know our leaders need. And I think about the leader within competency. And I think about, we address emotional intelligence and communication and all of those things. And sometimes we don't really get into in our formal programming or even in our dialogues how hard it is sometimes or how important it is to avoid some of the pitfalls that we can find ourselves in, particularly in nursing. We all know we're not often or we're not always all that kind to ourselves or to each other. And one of the things you and I have spent a lot of time talking about is just the dangers in gossip and what gossip or communication that can really erode trust, all of the damage that that can do, and we'll get to maybe how people can avoid it, but what are your thoughts on building trust as a leader and some of the behaviors that can erode that very quickly?
So, one of my favorite people that talks about trust, and bear with me because it's been a while since I have read it or listened to it, but it came from Dr. Charles Feltman. He wrote The Thin Book of Trust. And I'm probably going to butcher this definition, but I'm going to do my best. He says that it's trust is choosing to risk something that you value or making it vulnerable to another person's actions. And so when I think about gossip, that is one of the number one ways to erode a team and a culture, any relationship. I mean, we could be talking personally or professionally, uh, truthfully. And gossip is, I think I read somewhere they called it cheap bonding. And I hung on to that term because it's so true. It's easy to like have this quick intimacy over shared hatred, and we're talking on election day, and I am not gonna go down that road.
Right.
But it is really easy when we share this same hatred rather than unifying against something and, going toward a common purpose, we can tear it down so easily. And even when you really know this and it's who you are and you have the integrity, it can be really easy to be drawn into it, even in the safest spaces. And I don't know if you're okay with me sharing this, so here I am, making a vulnerable situation. Let's just do it right here. But the whole conversation of us talking about this came from an instance where someone who I think we both trust deeply. I think the 3 of us could be in a shared space and say whatever it is we want to say, but in a moment we choose not to share someone else's story. We all know the information and we say, you know what? You should pick up the phone and call Amy because that's her story to tell. And how much that means, not just to you, who may or may not ever know that that conversation happens, but what I'm saying to that individual is, what you share is safe with me, even though I know that we have there's a vault and you know that you can
Yeah.
trust each other.
Yeah, and in that situation, very much so, somebody that we both know and trust was really what I call being a spotter or endorser for you by sharing that also. Like, hey, just so you know, I asked what happened of a colleague that we both and she encouraged me to talk to you and said you by name and I did. I reached out to you intentionally to thank you for that. Because it means the world, and very often we don't have that closed loop. In fact, we start to assume, and sometimes rightfully, not about you and I or that situation, but, one of the things I've always said is somebody speaking to me privately about somebody else, I can guarantee that they're in a room talking about me with somebody else. And those are little cues that we just never think of, and I try to be I'm not perfect at this, certainly anybody who's listening or watching that knows me could probably name a time where I have fallen short in this category. We all and yet, as those neither, for our listeners, trying to help them grow, we know our leaders are looking for mentorship and can't always find it. This is a really important topic that people don't often address. What do you do? You're in a situation when you start talking about somebody to somebody else, I can again guarantee they are thinking What are they saying about me when I'm not there? And so it's a rightful concern on their part, right? And so we have to be as leaders, people are always watching. When we talk through even as I spent some time as a CNO, a short time, but it takes a while to realize, hey, people are watching me as Amy CNO. I'm not Amy Trueblood, wife, you know, daughter, all of those things. I am Amy Trueblood, chief nursing officer, and the words that come out of my mouth are impactful, whether I believe them to be private or whether they're public. And you have to treat all of those conversations as such. It's tough because, well, one of the things I was going to mention before I get into this, I was studying on well being. Recently, we were talking about this, and one of the facets of well being is social well being and emotional well-being, and both of those indicate the need for a supportive social network, and I often think about how often do we check our social networks to see how supportive are they really? It's one thing to have a network and to think like, "Yeah, I have my team of shared things that we can gripe about and shared kind of woes that we share." But who's out there trying to support me, and who am I supporting? And because we talk about needing friends at work. What's your take on that? Like, you need a best friend at work. What is that about?
Oh, there's always so much about what does that mean? That my best friends are not at work, right? I have been invested in by some really incredible people that have taught me. And it's kind of at this time of the year where we're moving into the holidays where I'm reflecting on my year and what went well. Who are my circle of five? And I need to have people in there that I'm working to build up, but are they encouraging me to be a better person? Are they lifting and elevating each other up collectively all the time?
Mhm.
Who are those people you turn to? I do think you need to have that person to share your woes with, but you probably need a person or two. Not everyone needs to know that story. So it is nice to have someone at work that you can share that with that understands where you're coming from, but it's really easy. It's so simple, even when you're aware of how it impacts trust, to find yourself in a situation where someone comes in, "Hey, did you hear about so and so?" Or, "Can you believe they did this?" in a group and not shut it
Right.
down. And what do you do in those moments, you said? You've just even whenever you step into it, right? There's another aspect of trust, accountability. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have engaged in this conversation. I'm not gonna continue on until Amy is present here. Or this is a conversation for you to have with Amy. And real friends, that gets tricky, right? Calling work friends and family, it's a fine line because I believe you've really got to care about people. But accountability to say, you know what, I stepped in this because I'm human and I'm going to back out of it. And I want you to see that this is the way I would
Right.
respond for you as well. I trust is built in small moments. We think it's this big, like you saved my life or you did something crazy. It's not. It's really these tiny little moments where they remember people's names that
Right.
are important to you. One of the most powerful things is someone who shows up at a funeral for something that was dear to you or remembered you or sent you a message. And another thing I think that I want to make sure I say about trust, it's those asking for help when you need it. I feel like that is one of the biggest indicators of trust. And so when I think about my friends or my circle, and work is weird for me, right? Now I work with myself for the most part. So who is my people? My people are people like you and people that are doing this similar work. When we reach out to each other and ask for help, that is one of the biggest indicators of trust.
Yeah, and I think that when you're honestly looking for feedback, th to me, my friends are a trusted resource of people that are going to tell me the truth, and so I don't always want to I feel like I'm a decently self-aware person, and I can tell when something's not right and I want the feedback of what I need to do better or different. I don't want people to feel like they need to dance around to feed an ego or anything like that. Like, that's who I consider my friends, are those that are trying to support me and will tell me the tough things in love because they want me to grow and be better, you know? And one of the things that I'll just direct our listeners to as well is Stephen Covey's work on the trust account and the bank account, and thinking of things, because we mentioned we're all going to fall into situations where we do what he would say as a debit, right? Where and so you need to think about, like, if sometimes when you're new to an organization or to a position, it's really hard, because before you can go in and make all these different decisions, you need to build up your trust credits with these small acts like you're talking about, asking for help, having people know, hear, and see you speak well of them publicly, always about your leaders, always about your teams. Nothing worse than, I believe, sometimes, what I've seen and been a part of is, a group of managers sitting around talking about the woes of their team, and their team is lazy, or they're not committed, or this Gen Z is now, it's the older you get, the more you realize that this just happens every generation. Gen Z, don't feel bad. You'll be out of it soon enough as you get older, that because it was Gen X, it was millennial, the youngest generation is always kind of blamed, and here we sit and talk about that. And the thing that I'll just finish up on Covey's work is that, the more you build up your trust, then you can afford, if you will, some debits. And one of the other really important skills I don't think we talk enough about is what I call spotting or being a cosigner. Right? If you come new into an organization where I know that your trust account isn't built up yet because you're new, and perhaps I've hired you and want to build you up, I need to let you borrow or co-sign from my trust account if it's an environment in which I have that, and build you up so that you can build that up knowing that you're going to make some debits over time because we're human. And that's what I think is just so brilliant and under talked about from even his work, is there has to be an emotional intelligence level to know I want what's best for the organization. I want what's best for my patients and my team. And a person has come on board now that may need some help if I have it to offer them. That should be something that we also perfect, is our skills at that, building people up, helping them build that account.
That is something we don't talk about enough, and I remember you, sharing this concept when we used to teach together. I think it was
Yeah.
developing the leader within. How significant is that? But then also, are you co-signing for the right people,
Right.
right? And you wanna assume good intent and have belief in everybody and give them the best, but at the same time, if I'm gonna call you up and endorse someone and say, I'm gonna use some of my trust account here," making sure that you're doing that in the right pace, right? Not co-signing for
Right.
everyone, which feels kind of counterintuitive to who I wanna be as a person sometimes, but if I wanna maintain that trust, I've gotta only endorse the people that I know are, like,
Absolutely. When it comes to our work that we're doing now, or who should you partner with, or what type of organization should you look at, I'm thinking about for our managers or our supervisors or directors. Let's say you get a new director. Let's say you get a new CNO. Let's say you get a new CEO. Part of your role is to endorse their success in your organization, and so regardless, you have conversations you need to have behind closed doors with them directly. Publicly, you are, and with
yes.
them, you are building up your staff as well. You need to build that trust in you and your team with any new leader that comes on board as well. And so those are just skill sets that I think we underutilize, or maybe we're even underaware of the power that comes with that. And I think of it, from a study of bias from my perspective, and how that starts to shape. Bias is it starts to be created through stories and your own personal
Yeah.
experiences, So if you say, "Oh, yeah, this new manager over here, I've heard that she's really tough on whatever, or he or she isn't very friendly, or it was really just going to be whatever it might be that's negative." The team that's working for that new leader now already is developing bias that's really hard to overcome for them to build their own trust relationship with people at that time also. And so I just think we need to talk more about how the power of our words shapes everything, and people need us at times to endorse, to co-sign, and as you mentioned, to not co-sign on somebody that we know is not doing the right things, in the different situations that we're having those direct conversations as well.
Oh, man, that's such a hard concept, and I know we're not gonna be able to even scratch the surface, but I think it's so important because in those roles, you are on stage, like you mentioned, everyone's looking at you, leaning into every word that you say, regardless of what you meant by it, and how hard it is as a leader at times. I want to say that it's easy, but it's not. If you're my CNO and I don't believe in you, I can't
Right.
tell the world that. I have got to talk to you about that and get myself right or get in alignment with my values, which may look entirely different. But that's a tough thing for leaders to, I mean, you got to sell it yourself sometimes uh, because ultimately you have to support your leader and the organization that you work
Absolutely,
for.
absolutely, or make a change, right? Like you said, or you have to do if this is the values that you hold are not in alignment with the organization or your leader, again, those are conversations that you have. You see what you can do and control. Publicly, you're still with your teams and others have to be thinking about how are you and the patients the safest and how do I build these relationships knowing trust is so important. And then personally, internally, when do I need to make a decision? When is this at a point of imbalance that it can't be overcome?
Yeah, which is a harder, whole different discussion.
We do need that hour.
We really do. There's one other thing I wanted to mention about trust. Just I've done a lot of reading on this because I think it's just foundational to everything, not just my professional life, but my personal life as well. There's a couple called the Gottmans, and their work is all about relationships and marriage. But they talk about the importance of these bids for connection is what they call it, which may be as simple as I think the first time they talked about it is like, "Hey, Amy, look at that red bird out there." And if you don't look up or acknowledge that, if you continue to ignore my bids for connection, which may be the seemingly smallest moment, you begin to feel like, okay, they can't be trusted. And there was an example of let's say it's sports season. So we just finished the World Series, but I'll go with World Series. Like you get excited, like I'm going to go to this, sit down, watch this game. Like I've gotten everything accomplished. And then you see, like, oh man, I really want to avoid this phone call that's coming through because I know my friend's having a hard time and I have this whole plan. But when you miss that and you don't stop anyways and create that relationship, the trust that that builds. And so in your work, this happens all the time. We're really busy. We got to hit this deadline. We got to achieve this goal. We've got to, and you see something and you just walk right past it. You're missing an opportunity to build trust within your team, within what you see for the people that you serve, to achieve those ultimate goals. So I know that was way off topic, but that's just something really critical to trust that.
Yeah, no, I think it is
Yeah.
critical, and it speaks to some of the processes too that we know are best practices. It's the hidden aspect of what is valuable in my mind about things like rounding with your employees, or saying you're going to have a meeting and then not showing up or canceling a one-on-one time with an employee, or the reasons that it's more than just like, "Oh, that gives a bad look." It starts to erode trust in that really, really important relationship, and I know that, again, it's just not we don't really talk about how do you overcome that, and those are the things about being consistent. Let your yes be your yes and your no be your no consistently, even if it's hard. I remember one time I was so convicted about this. I had had a conversation about a colleague, and wasn't a great conversation and wasn't uplifting to that colleague, and she didn't even know that I had done it, and I went to her and apologized and shared the circumstances, and, it didn't go great, like, because she's like, "What?" You know what I mean? But I knew I needed to acknowledge and apologize, and it ultimately ended up working out okay, but that was really hard. That requires courage, like, I could have very easily tried to live with myself. It wasn't a terrible I don't want people to think it was, like, something really, really bad, but it was just I was convicted about it, and I needed to acknowledge that, try to at least say it was for my own peace that I needed to make sure that I had done what I needed to do, and that was really, really hard, or stepping back to the team and apologizing for something or owning up to something that they don't know that I did. I've had that circumstance before too. And again, it's just really hard. I don't know. I think you just have to have your own kind of barometer internally to know that. And when is that point? And if people need help with that conversation, I know you and I are always open to people just reaching out if you need an ear or you need a help to navigate this situation, because we know just how hard it is for these leaders out there every day, and the complex situations that we're facing.
Oh my gosh, and it's so much easier what you said, choose courage over comfort, and it is so much easier just to pretend that it go on, but I promise it's growing roots. And what you described is integrity, right? You choosing what's right over what's
Right.
easy. And then that accountability piece of apologizing when you get it wrong,
Exactly.
that does so much to build up that.
And it really does. And, an organization I used to work with, and I'm going to forget, I believe that the organization was called Higher Ground. They were a consulting group that worked with us when I was a leader out in Colorado. And they used to talk about fear and relief versus learn and serve. And so those are two different kind of behaviors, cultures, whatnot. And you mentioned it before, like when we're scared of something, or we don't know about something, we're fearful, we get relief by just making stuff up, talking poorly about people. It makes us feel better. Get an army of people that agree with us, and we'll just what did you call it? Like shared hatred together, and that makes us feel better. That's a fear and relief culture. If a circumstance arises and I don't wanna address it with my team, maybe I'm afraid of what they'll think of me if I stand up for a certain person or a certain act. I get relief by just avoiding it, versus a learn and serve mentality, which is, what do I learn from this? How do I serve this situation, the organization, myself, and others best in this moment? Knowing that we're all gonna make mistakes, knowing that human conversations are gonna occur all the time, and it takes courage to say, "Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. How am I gonna learn?" And then move forward in service versus seeking kind of relief that I know is based on being scared of something.
Which all goes back to where we started of that vulnerability that's required in it. And it's so much easier. Well, I don't know that it's easier, but seems easier to just armor up because, if it feels unsafe with you, then maybe just better to not address it. But look at all the joy and the opportunity to serve that you miss out on when you choose not to embrace
Right.
vulnerability.
Absolutely. That's where the joy is, I think, in leadership, and knowing that you've positively impacted people's lives, that you have not steered away from some of the harder conversations, and really acknowledged and tried to help people grow. I think that ultimately we're afraid of isolation, we're afraid of vulnerability, we're afraid that people won't like us, people won't want to spend time with us. But if the time is spent in gossip or in unproductive, us versus them types of discussions at work, they're just so damaging. And I guess we're here to encourage our listeners to be courageous in those situations. Write it down. That's was one thing else. Like, you maybe not be great in the moment. At least if you start to recognize yourself as you do your inventory at the end of the day or the week or the year, as you were mentioning, what went well today? What didn't go well today? How am I going to address that differently? And give yourself grace to know we're human and there are some instincts here, but learning from it will allow us to serve better.
No, it becomes so much easier the more you put it into practice. It's that whole, well, with anything that you do, right? It's you become experienced and it becomes normalized. So when someone brings up someone else's name, you don't even think about it. But you grow up. I just think about when we were talking, I'm thinking about Mean Girls and the burn book and the shared hatred created this unity, but look what it did to tear people down. And one of the kids came home from school saying they were not allowed to sit at a particular table. And a child said, "Come on, I'll share my seat with you." And that one tiny little thing is what really builds up that trust in that particular person versus that whole bad experience. So if you are just courageous enough to be that one to say, come on, I'm going to welcome you into this group that's excluding you, what that does for you is unbelievable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Well, the time has flown by as I knew it would, but anything that we haven't
Right.
covered or any last words of wisdom you might share with our listeners?
I think just keep doing what you're doing. We are so grateful for the work that you do out there. It is the toughest job. Keep aiming to grow and get better every day. Give yourself grace for the moments that you fail, and just keep chugging along. But man, the impact you would make on the people that you work with, the people you serve goes far beyond what you will ever see.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal. I couldn't agree more. And I know that you're available and you're on social, and our listeners can find you there. And we'll share the episode as well in the next couple of months. Thrill. Thank you so much for being on here. And it's so great to see you. And we'll keep our peace over today. I'm like, I got to go vote. And I hope that our listeners have all voted by the time this airs, it'll be over. But regardless, we're going to move forward with integrity and peace and start building those trust and relationships and continue to build on them. So you're you're a valued friend to me. I appreciate you being on.
Likewise, I'm thrilled we finally got around to it.
All right, take care. Have a good day.